All right, man, let's have some fun today. Let's go.
Let's do it. April 11th, the year 2023. Welcome to everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast, and this is episode 675.
Yep. 30 days of podcasting over the career of our life. Isn't that what you just said?
Days, something close to that, yeah. A month of our lives dedicated to you, the people, the listeners, my mom, your mom, and then about 14 of our closest friends.
That's got to be worth something, man.
That's it. Yeah, we did the calculation, just kind of think through things. Like a month of life has been dedicated to this podcast since we started, which is honestly really cool to think about in the scheme of things, and being able to do things that you love and that get your juices flowing and that fills your cup. So I wouldn't have it any other way. Happy to be here today. Hope you had an amazing weekend, and hopefully you are getting some springtime weather. And if you're not, well, the rest of us are getting some for you. So you'll get some springtime weather here soon enough, and hopefully you had a great racing weekend. It's it's April. The year has begun in terms of the North American racing season. We'll talk a little bit about racing season in general on today's podcast. But before we get started, if it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general terms are very valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to the world championships, and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them and Training Peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question and let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that is oftentimes promoted as overcomplicated, with way too many things out there to get confused by. It is a safe and consistent space to get quality information from wise athletes from all ranges of abilities that have been around the block and have been there and done that. It can hopefully help you avoid some of the pitfalls and obstacles and mistakes that we all have in our triathlon hobbyist career. So go in there, be part of the community. Don't be a lurker. Participate. We all have things of value, and you all have great questions. So we'll go in there about once a month, like we did last week. Do a bit of a Q&A and answer as many questions as we can for the people. Take the pulse of the community. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We don't do ads, but we do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that maybe that can be our new self-help book. Just commit 30 days of your life to follow your dream, and do you think that would work? Just if everybody would commit, that's like 700 hours. What was Malcolm Gladwell's 1,000 hours or whatever?
I mean, it'd be a great way to sell shit, because that's what people look for.
Yeah, we'll sell the hell out of that book.
And since you said it, I have to give a quick shout out to your lady, Emily, who just hit 30 straight days of sessions. And I will say her comment struck me in Training Peaks, where she said, I was tired of my own excuses. And I personally am a huge fan of people who quit. And I think a lot of people have like that kind of their coaches oftentimes get a lot of credit, undeserved credit, for getting people back into the mix or getting people off the couch or, motivating people or, getting them out. But no rah-rah speech, no go get them, no rip of the ass. None of that really gets someone in the game consistently. You might get them off the couch for a day. Right. You might watch a movie and you might be inspired, right? You might get out there and go do something, and it lasts for all but a day or two, right? Kind of like, the 30-day books or the, 7-day this or the whatever gets it. But really you have to, in order to really flip the switch that has to be 100% on you. Period. You can buy whatever book you want to buy. You can commit to whatever, Facebook group of accountability you want to. You can make whatever chart you want to make to and paste it on your mirror in your bathroom. You can hire a coach. You can ask them to, rip a new one. But ultimately, sustained success where you are super successful and committed happens in one place. It happens inside your head. When you finally figure out or have either a reason to turn things around and stay committed, or B, you get just fucking tired of your own lame excuses. And that is something that I think everybody needs to hear, because we oftentimes blame everything, right? That's human beings, especially here in America. We are great at complaining our way through and blaming our way through life. It's really no one's fault. Right. It's really not. It's never our fault personally. It's always someone else's fault or something's fault. Right. We have a very hard time taking responsibility for our own actions or inactions. And so I think it's an incredible skill to have to recognize, where, your failures or flaws and then overcome them. And that's what, consistency looks like. It's just committing to something and really intrinsically being motivated to do something or to not do something. So I think it's a great reminder for everyone. And, again, a good shout out to your girl, Em.
Yeah. I've been kind of thinking about that sort of thing lately, because I was getting into these pull-ups and push-ups things and going back and forth, and I was really feeling it and I liking it. And then my wrist got like super sore, like a tendonitis thing going on. And man, it is like a little bit debilitating, I got to say. And I was thinking about, man, how easy it is in the sport to kind of have these little things pop up like that all the time. My ankle hurts. I got this. My knees bother me. The hip, on and on and on. And how easy it is to kind of like flip into off mode, because it's like, oh, woe is me. And I was kind of feeling that a little bit this weekend. And I was up at the cottage, and I know we're getting into something later, but I was up, my mom's got all these hills and all these flowers and stuff like that. So I was raking out all these leaves, and I had that wrist thing, but it was bothering me, but not enough, so I kept going. It was a lot of work, but I had a lot of fun with it, and got done, and we were just kind of hanging out on the deck. And I'm like, that just felt good to me. And I didn't get a workout in that day, but I did a lot of stuff, and it was something different. And I kind of had this weird guilt feeling about not working out and maybe not being at Training Peaks, but it was a weekend. It was Easter weekend. And I'm like, what am I doing, man? Why can't I just relax and just go through life and do stuff that feels good and whatever? But my point, I guess, is that we always have these things. And my thought was, well, my wrist isn't really hurting my running, or I could probably sit on a bike and do some riding. And, so I got that going. And yesterday I was out running, and I was like, man, it's funny you say that, because it is so easy to blame other people or other things, or there's always something out there to be like, oh, the world's screwed up, or this and that. And what's the point? And I was out there running, and I kind of blame myself a lot. I get kind of sick of my own excuses too. And I can remember I was out there running. I was having fun. I was going slow, and I was probably went a little bit further than I was used to. But I kept saying, "You're not quit wimping out. Just enjoy the find your spot and quit looking for excuses, man. Just do something. Just do things that make you feel good." And then I got done running. I felt really good. And then later that night, I was kind of like a little bit sore. And I was like, screw this, man. But you just got to move through it. I just think it's always part of the game a little bit. I think the days of, especially for somebody getting up there like me, the days of not having any little pains are kind of like going to get tougher to get by.
I'll share I'll share a quick story that mimics yours. And then before I talk about today's topics of racing and where to put in smaller races or BC races within the calendar year and how to approach those and either train through them or train around them. But I had a very similar experience. I didn't have any landscaping injuries, but I was out running Easter morning, and I was doing like my second, or I was my last interval on a run. All of a sudden, I had an incredible run. It was a beautiful morning. Trails were quiet, because it was Easter morning, and I was that guy out running. And trails were quiet, beautiful morning. Intervals were great, and I just was about halfway through my last one. Legit out of nowhere, my knee and like my whole upper leg, like, my quad, legit felt like I broke my leg out of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
Hey, I felt that before.
It's like, it was really painful. And of course I did what, I normally do, which is I kept running. I slowed down my pace to where I was at least still like, in the interval range I wanted to be in, but I was like, God, this really hurts. And instead of, your first thought is always, right? And then this isn't like a, run through pain and be stupid thing, but it is like, do immediate triage of the situation. My first thought was, oh my God, what have I done? I think that's everyone's first thought, right? Oh my God, what's happened? What have I done? And then I went back and I'm like, just slow it down so where I can stay in the interval and still do a pretty good job. And, and then I was like, okay, I didn't do anything. Nothing traumatic happened.
Right.
Like there was no 5-minute mile downhill, right? There was no giant increase in running. I was like, I didn't hurt myself. The more likely culprit is that I'm just super tight in my IT band and my quads and my hamstring on that side. Because I did a run the day before. That was some hills, and I went and sat, kind of all day, which is, terrible, I guess, really, for not really, but it is for recovery. So I was like, all right, just let me run. Let me just keep running through this. And eventually it went away, but I had to kind of adjust my stride. But my first thought was, I'm just going to pack. I'm going to pack it in. I'm hurt. And it's crazy how that's always our first go-to is to just cave. And I get it. It's that our body's self, safety mechanism, which is protecting yourself and, your governor but yeah, you do. I think it's always important to kind of work through those things. And one of the things my sponsor told me back in the day when I first got a treatment, he was like, when I talk about worry and talk about anxiety and I talk about, things in the future, he would always just look at me and he would say, Robbie, he was like 82, old dude, super, super chill, but very wise. And he just looked at me, he goes, is there anything wrong right now? I was like, no, we're here having lunch at Dalt's, which is the biggest old school, old person place to eat in Nashville. Yeah. And it was always his place to go. He was like, you got all these things coming up and all these things, but is anything wrong right now? I said, no. So we're just here, having lunch and, enjoying ourselves. He's like, okay, then everything is fine. And I was like, damn it. I was like, yeah, you're right. Everything is fine. But it is even though in the moment that pain didn't seem, fine. It was more of let me think through all the reasons why it's not, why it's a broken leg or I can't run for 8 weeks or I should walk home. Because what would have happened is if I had walked home, right, or called for a ride, then I would have put myself on the shelf really for no reason. Right. And then what happens is, once you choose one excuse or one, bad reason or I'm hurt, the next thought is in that same direction. What's happening or what can I do? I need to go to the doctor. I need to get an MRI. I need to take a couple of days off running. I need to do this. It's always down that same hole instead of finishing out my interval, finishing out my run, and then being like, I just need to do a better job of rolling out and stretching, and then, got back to work the next day. So it's one, all of our decisions are connected. That's why it's also going back to, talking about Emily, that's why it's so hard to break habits. But once you get into a habit, it's not easy to keep them, but your body craves whatever, trajectory the decision you make is on. It's not, our mind and our body is not good at changing course. right? We like to stay in one trajectory. So if it's sitting on your ass on the couch and not doing workouts, guess what? Your mind's going to tell you to do the rest of the week. Sit on your ass, not do anything, and sit on the couch. But if you are committed to getting up and, starting a streak or getting your life together or finding a reason and getting tired of your excuses, guess what? Every day that you do that, you create a pattern to where your mind is telling you more, get up and do it. Get up earlier, go to bed earlier, make time, rearrange things, stop making excuses. So every decision we make swings the pendulum in one direction or the other, either away from training and away from commitment and away from accountability, away from, staying motivated and engaged and within the process, or it swings the other way, making excuses, finding reasons, putting it off till next Monday, putting it off till tomorrow, moving all your runs and bikes and training peaks all to the weekend. Like that's shit's ever going to work out for you. Make a decision.
I love that
right?
one.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Make a decision and find that. And it's a hard thing to do, but I think always a good reminder.
I'm going to make up this ride Saturday after my long ride.
Right. So yeah, as a coach, you can appreciate that. Like you lay out this, workout week for an athlete and they skip Monday and Tuesday because they don't have any time and they don't feel very good. But then all of a sudden you look and like their Saturday is a 3-hour ride, an hour and a half run, and an open water swim. And you're like, that ain't happening. Just skip it and move on. All you're doing is delaying when it's going to become red. So Don't delay it. Don't change your calendar. And speaking of calendars, that was one of the topics I wanted to have today. It's an exciting time of year. The sun is out again for most of us. Everybody's feeling a little bit froggy. Get outside, get on your tri bike, get on your road bike. Regardless, you're outside. You're not getting virtual thumbs up from total strangers. You're outside enjoying Mother Nature and the weather and the wind and the terrain. Getting used to riding your bike, you're outside more on your runs, races are closer. You see other people racing. It's an exciting time. And some of the more popular questions that we get this time of year are, one, hey, I'm thinking of, it's all about race changing right now that for the good and the bad, right? I think just in like the last 24 hours, I've had, a couple of athletes say their race got canceled. I want to move up from Olympic to 70.3, or I think I don't want to do a 70.3. I think I want to do an Olympic. It's now that we have come to like ahead, right? January, February, March. It's still early enough for most people's race calendar, depending on where they live or how early their big races, where it's still, they kind of still find themselves in, hope land. I can probably still do it. I probably still got it. I got plenty of time to get my fitness back. And then now that, the warm weather is out, races are happening, you got deadlines, right? I either got to commit or not. I got to register or not. And so I think it's a great time to talk about when to weave things in, when to make decisions to move up or not in distance, when to scale down in distance, and before we even head off with that is, I had an athlete just this morning say, hey, I know I told you I wanted to do Des Moines. They just came off a half marathon PR, unbelievable race, in great shape. And he did a very non-triathlete thing. He said, looking at Des Moines, I know I signed up for it. I know I'm in good shape, but my work week afterward isn't really conducive, to things. I think it's too stressed. I think I'm just not, take me out of, Des Moines bucket, because I haven't registered, and I probably just stick with shorter things this year to make things, a little bit easier on me. Like, what? Yeah. Wait, what is this responsible, objective, mature conversation we're having right now in Training Peaks? Because that's not what triathletes like to have, right? But it's a good reminder to, one, right? Because most athletes that, come out of a great race are total prisoners of the moment from a performance standpoint. Are like, oh, well, you think I can qualify for Kona this year? I could probably squeeze in a couple fulls before the deadline, to qualify for next year if you're a guy. Like, it's a total opposite. So when you're looking at your race count, you're looking at moving up, moving back, taking out a race, adding a race. Don't do it based on where you are fitness-wise first. First and foremost, always do it around life. Does it make sense with where you are in life? Does it make sense with your work schedule? Do you travel a lot? Is there more demands in your professional life in Q3 than there are in Q2 or Q4? Like, that's something that, I have tons of conversations about athletes when they look at scheduling, we look at back at, prior years is, you had a really busy professional Q2 and Q3. Why are we still looking at doing your main races, through then? You should look to maybe start, things in a different quarter, or you look at, athletes who have kids that are out of school in the summertime. It's like, oh, summer's the best time, but you don't have a built-in babysitter. You're not sending your kids to school. It's a lot harder to get training in for a lot of people. So always ask yourself that life question first. But then when you go and you look at the different scenario, when you look at an athlete, who may or may not have a good race or a bad race, right? So we'll talk about both scenarios. This athlete had a great race. Instead of going, again, most people say, yeah, I think I'm gonna go longer. I think I'm in a great shape. Let's go for it. Is more importantly is, where is my big race of the year? Right. So if you're asking yourself, should I move my sprint to an Olympic? Should I move my Olympic to a sprint? Should I move my 70.3 to a full? Right. Those are the natural stages. Should I move my half marathon to a full marathon? A lot of questions you have to ask yourself is, one, what is my main goal for this year? What is my main focus? Is it to get faster? Is it to go longer? Right. It's very, very, very hard to do both at the same time. Right. To go faster than stay faster for longer. Is the timing of the race work well with my life? Does the timing of the race work well with my training? Am I being a prisoner of the moment? Right. And if it's not your A race, right, how is this race going to complement my training, or is the stimulus provided going to be conducive to putting myself in a better position for my big race of the year, right? How does it fall in proximity? Is it 2 weeks before, or is it 8 weeks before, right? Is my big race of the year a 70.3? And if it is doing a full middle of the year a good idea? No, right? Because you gotta scale back on speed to add in duration and time, and that's going to eat away a little bit at your speed. It's natural. That's just what happens. Always ask yourself questions, how these things interlock, how these things will fit into the big scheme of things. And you picked an A race for a reason, because it's the most important one to you. For whatever reason, that race is the most important race for you, whether it's because of the location, whether it's because you want a PR, whether it's because you'll have family there, whether it's because it's something all your friends are doing. For whatever reason, 6, 8, 10, 12 months ago, you picked this race as the race, the most important thing. So don't get distracted in the lead up asking yourself, yeah, but I think I can do this. You can think your way to a lot of things. You can make your way through a lot of races. Is it conducive from a race, from a complementary standpoint, to do extra and to do more if you really want to do your best? Most of the time, almost always, the answer is no.
All right. Sorry.
Did I solve, or did I put you to sleep because I went on?
I was just like, I thought you were on a roll, and then you just braked it.
Yeah,
so,
I did a hard stop. I did the Kramer.
Stop short.
Stop short,
man. Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, back in the day, because it always just, remember before Chattanooga 70.3 ruined everything by putting Rev 3 Knoxville out of business. That was always my Olympic. And then I would do like a mid-June, July half, and then I would do a fall full. And it just always seemed to work perfectly. I was in Training Peaks with one of my athletes yesterday, and he's kind of in the Olympic mode. And he's just been kind of doing his thing. And then yesterday he went out and kind of, really turned the legs over and got everything going. And he ran some kind of, some tempo, some interval stuff. And he's like, wow, that just kind of, I hadn't been doing that, and it felt so good. I think that's the one thing about, especially Olympics to me, is that when they pop in, normally if you're doing a full in the fall, I mean, you're going to be, quote unquote, in Olympic shape, most of the summer, or hopefully. And I think it's a good thing, because I was even thinking about that yesterday on my run, is that sometimes we can kind of settle in, and everyone is like, I'm not getting any faster. And I think a lot of times it's because we're a little bit lazy with our running. And I think it's good to kind of pop one of those in there, even if, you might normally have a big weekend for Ironman or something like that. If you get a nice Olympic in there and maybe kind of round it out with a nice easy ride on the day after or something to loosen things up, I think it's a good thing for the old neurological connection stuff, because a little bit of a longer swim, it kind of puts you in that 1,500 half range a little bit. And it's just good to feel that, I think even if you're not ready to go out there and rip it, but you kind of just know that it's a little bit of a, it's an attainable distance, and you can push yourself a little bit just to sort of like, I think they're good to get things, kind of get the juices flowing a little bit. So for me, I've never really been one to, I mean, like if I decide I'm going to do Olympic, it just sort of pops in there sometimes. If I feel like, if it's something I want to do, and I was just talking about this earlier, I just want to have fun, and it seems like a fun thing to do. I'm going to go do it. I think you can't go wrong there. I think back to, it was different. It was a half marathon, but way back in the day when we were training for maybe Louisville or Wisconsin, I can't remember, but you hit me up. You're like, hey, we're doing doing the marathon on Saturday. It was like 2 days away or something like that. And it ended up being my best ever, but it gave me sort of a shot in the arm. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying the same thing you are, but I think that, dropping in an Oli, but just kind of making it part of the deal, I think sprints maybe are a little bit different because for me, it's just the swim, because if you're going to go out and do a sprint and it's like a 300-yard swim, that really doesn't necessarily give you that feeling of, swimming a half or quite a long distance. For me, it's always been a challenge early in the year to hit that 1,500 solid. So am I even saying anything near what you're saying? I'm just kind of like rambling.
I think you're in the ballpark as usual. I think one of the biggest things people need to understand and realize again is if you are, let's say you're doing a 70.3 and you want to weave in an Olympic, right? Or let's say you're doing an Olympic and you want to weave in a sprint. If you're within 4, 6, 8 weeks of your event, you should be in enough shape to where doing one of those on a weekday is no biggie. Like you're more than likely doing more than that in training. A 70.3, these are a great example. I think Olympics are awesome training in the lead up for a 70.3, right? You need to definitely adjust your weekly intensity because your entire Olympic is going to be at intensity. So you don't need to overload yourself from an intensity standpoint, but it's a great way, right, to go through, right, check things off your list, right? Especially if you haven't raced in a while. People got so out of it, yes, race shape, yes, but also like what is required to race, right? In terms of the mental and, the mental engagement, also how physically demanding it is on race day and how to push yourself past it. Because then everyone got out of like the mental and emotional strength, right? And the headspace and the bandwidth to push yourself on race day. That happened in 2020, early 2021 when there weren't any races. And so now actually people race a lot less. And so when you do race, you need to have a purpose, right? Don't just do it just to do it. You can either do it to figure things out, right? To make sure your gear's right, to go through the motions, to kick off any rust, right? But don't make it in my opinion, don't make it just a freebie, right? Have a plan and have a purpose, right? And actually go after, like if you're doing a 70.3, a lot of times I think doing one a week out, if you want, an Olympic is a great kind of last, top off of your fitness, right? It's a hard swim, it's a hard bike, and it's a short run, right? It's a lot of intensity, but it really kind of helps you top off the icing and the sprinkles, if you will, of the huge cake that you've been building. Now, if it falls in between, weeks 4, 5, and 6 when your final build, don't spend the whole week tapering for it. If honestly, don't taper at all. Right, weave it into your schedule. If it's on a Sunday, still do your long ride on Saturday. That's most people are, they get their A race is the one that's next, and so they get so concerned with what the time is that the time is going to have on their ego or their mental headspace or what people might think that they'll taper like a whole effing week for an Olympic. I'm like, if you're in 70.3 shape, 2 days max, or don't taper at all. Period. Like don't even do one. Like people way over taper for short races. Tapering for most people is the worst thing you can possibly do for these short races because you want to keep a fair amount of tension by it. Most people, for an Olympic, they'll take off they'll have like 2 rest days. They'll barely ride. They'll take off swimming. A couple things in order. Always keep your swimming up. especially if you're a poor swimmer. If you swim 145 pace or slower in the pool, then race week, if it's on a Sunday, you need to swim 3 times before race day, period. Because you will lose feel for the water so quick that on race day, you won't have any feel, which will make you slower. But people just shut it down. On the bike, right? Lower volume, keep the intensity. Your body is used to keeping the tension. It's used to the intent. Don't make all your fast twitch muscles go dormant. Don't make your legs stale and sloppy. It's an Olympic. You ain't got that much time for things to warm up, right? Running wise, again, reduce volume, keep intensity. People are so scared that's gonna be a detriment by doing too much intensity race week. And I go through this conversation with a lot of new reps, like, yeah, I think I should taper a little bit long. I'm like, okay, first off, do you deserve a taper, right? Have you done the volume and the intensity that really, dictates your body needing a down period? And then how important is this race? So like if you're in 70.3 training, don't waste a week, right? Because that's another huge question. So I'll have athletes like do Monday through Saturday, just par for the course. Regular Monday through Friday, like you're in the build or peak phase for 70.3. Sunday, long ride. Sunday, Olympic. Done. And that stimulus and that impact and load is pretty close to like a longer run, right? The run is significantly shorter, half the distance probably as at a 10K, but it's really, 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 really hard. But you had a great open water swim, great practice for your race. You had a really hard bike, which makes the 10K, you're basically your long run. And then have an easy Monday and easy Tuesday, and then right back to work. But always ask yourself, right? How is my preparation for this race, and is my recovery going to be fairly quick? How does it weave into things? How does it complement things? Had an athlete let's do an Ironman Tulsa, and they did Texas 70.3. Timing was great, worked in well. They got like a 6-day taper. Why? Because it's not their big race. Tulsa's their big race. So they didn't get 2 weeks. They had their regular build the week before and a huge build. And then what I also knew is their fitness level was at a high enough point to where all we did was, I think Sunday was a race. We did Monday and Tuesday, day off, Tuesday, Wednesday, easy spins. And then the weekend was back to regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah.
Long ride, long run. Like you got in a great stimulus, but it didn't really take you out of, because I think one of the things people underestimate with races and adding things in, right, is sprints and Olympics specifically, because people really look down on those because of the distance and that they're not 70.3s or fulls. But if you ain't in shape and you just kind of started going, right, and you're 70.3 training, you're just kind of going through the motions and you're not really working on getting faster. You're just kind of working on, keeping your same fitness and going longer. If you really go out and smash a sprint or Olympic, if you're not in shape for it, you're going to be smoked for a week. Yeah. And you probably tapered for the week before. So now you lost isn't the right word, but now you've compromised 2 weeks of training that you really don't have for a sprint. So you always ask yourself, and I always have this conversation with athletes that want to do, they got to do a marathon before their big, Ironman of the year. And I'm like, a couple things about that is, marathon training, and if you really want to run it well, then you need to reduce your bike and swim training a little bit. So you're going to be lacking a little bit there. You're going to have to taper 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks beforehand. Then it's going to take you at least 3 weeks to recover, period. Marathons are so hard on your body. That's 5 weeks. Do you have 5 weeks? Right? You can't always just think about the race itself, right? Just like training, think about the week before, think about the week after. How is this going to complement things? And if I'm going out and I'm going to do an Olympic in my preparation for a 70.3, am I going to actually go at 70.3 watts, or am I going to go way above that and try to get in a really, 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 really hard session and actually top off, put a little bit of icing on the cake that I've been working on? Have a plan, right? You can't just kind of noodle your way through. And then the same thing, I said before is stop tapering so much for sprints and Olympics. My God, it's really is kind of crazy. When you look back at someone's training, you're like, well, okay, last Friday, Saturday, I did almost a 70.3, but here I am tapering for, pool swims where I'm doing, 2,500, 3,000 a day, where the open water swim is 1,500 meters. I'm doing 26 miles, during my interval session on a Tuesday. and my long runs are twice as long. Why are you tapering so long? Right? It's like you just always think about, again, the weeks before and the weeks after. How are things going to complement, and then what is your plan actually going to be for race day?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember or not, but this one time I was on the podium in an Olympic.
Rev 3, you got a free box of power bars. Never hear the end of it. Never. And I'm telling you, man,
No, but
it's gonna be on your fucking grave, your headstone. Swear to God. Here lies Mike Terali. And
Well, no.
in some kind of like, idolized, golden, gold plaque or mini statue is going to have that box of power bars that because I'm just going to relive the story super quick.
No, but okay.
Before you tell your story is, we were on this long ride, Mike and Corey Coggins, way back in the day on the Tracer, putting in, I don't know, like 80, 90 miles that day. Long ride, hot as hell. Pull over on the side, we're all, to take a leak. We're getting out of our, our cycling jerseys, all these kinds of snacks and stuff for them. And all of a sudden we started talking about what dads or what old dudes talk about, which is, the price of power bars at, different of various stores, convenience stores, grocery stores, online. So we're talking about that. And Mike so eloquently pops in, well, I wouldn't really know about that, not because he's not a father, and not because that's the way he thinks, but he says, yeah, I really wouldn't know because, I got this free box of power bars when I was on the podium in Rev 3. That was it. Just a sly little smooth, humble brag. I think it may have been the first humble brag I've ever witnessed before it became a thing, but you started it with the trend but yes, I'm very aware of your power bars.
Yeah, well, that was back when power bars were actually power bars too.
No, it's actually
now they're like sprinkled cupcakes and wedding cake, whatever. But it's my point of that was, I think at the time, because like I said, I would kind of scale it up. I would do that in May and then do the half in June, and it was sort of like, as I raced pretty well over there because I think I was training more for that race in the beginning. I was a little slower. I wasn't big on huge volume early in the year anyway, so I was kind of doing a little more specific to Olympic thinking, and it went well. But like if you're in the middle of Ironman training and pop in an Olympic, the odds are you're probably not going to win that thing because there's people out there on the circuit that are just doing Olis and they're just really ripping it up and stuff like that too. So that's always something to keep in mind, I think. And I think that, for me, when I go into those things, if they're mid-season, I have to, like you're saying, if you're not trained for it, because I've been shellacked by an Olympic in June before, and I thought I was like, all ready for it, and I went in and I went after it, and then I was just toast for like 2 days, man. I couldn't even, I was planning on riding on Sunday, and I couldn't even, there's just no way. And then, but on the other hand, I've had late season 70.3s and jumped right back in the fold, so it kind of depends on where you're at. So I always go into these things ever since then, especially thinking about where I'm at, like you're saying, have a plan and execute it. That plan may not be to win or get on the podium for power bars, but to go out and really kind of work on your pacing, work on your effort, and just actually feel it in a race setting, because there's really no substitute for that. I've kind of gone away from doing these things the last couple of years, and I think it's really kind of affected my Ironman racing, to be honest. Just because it sets your mind, and you have to really kind of go out and feel it, and especially with Olympic, so it's like, what is it, right? What do you push? If you're not in the greatest bike shape, you just want to push something that maybe you haven't been used to pushing, but not empty the tank on the bike and then just shred yourself completely on the run. I think it's all about like trying to understand where you're at. It's really a good exercise in effort and RPE, to be honest. You should know, you should be able to know where you're at without absolutely destroying yourself for the next 3 or 4 days when you do an Olympic. And that's really how I like to think about almost everything. But to be in a race setting and go through that and know what you have left and kind of just feel it out, and really, if you got something, push a little harder. There's a lot of value in that. But for sure, most of the time, I mean, I don't know. I feel pretty good about if I'm in good 70.3 shape, or at least sort of getting there for an Olympic, I mean, you're pushing. I mean, normally during the week, I'm just going balls to the walls on some of these trainer rides or these shorter interval rides and things like that. So you kind of got it, but now you got to put it together for a 25 miles, and what's that feel like, and get used to that feeling, and really execute something that is where you're at. It's like own where you're at, and this is a good example of it. Sometimes, you fail, but you got to learn, and I think it's just a good reminder. I mean, the more I'm away from racing, the more I'm kind of like struggling with that, and even understanding that you got a little more in the tank sometimes than you think. Understanding that and getting that feeling, because we do have a tendency long course to sort of settle into this thing, and I think it is just a bit of a laziness that sort of creeps in, and people always asking, like I said, I don't feel like I'm getting faster, and I think it's just because we're not running to run. We're just sort of like plodding along all the time, and I think you can run slow but sort of be engaged with it more often.
Your body will tell you everything you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's the question is are you a competent listener? And most people aren't when it comes to racing. That's why doing a sprint, doing an Olympic, doing a 5K, a 10K, even a half marathon, watchless, and with the only goal is to go as hard as you possibly can and then see what happens. But what about the data? I need the data when I get done to be able to analyze everything that's going on and how my training's going. We'll get the race splits. That's what timing mats are for. What we don't need is for you to hold back and make a race a training day. We're going to figure shit out. Right? You paid for it. Don't make it a training day where you hold yourself back because your watch says this. Just go out there and see what happens. Because what you're probably going to learn is that I thought I was going really hard and I'm not.
Yeah.
So again, self-calibration off, right? Everyone's so worried about calibrating their bike power meters or whatever it is, but calibrate yourself, right? And do it with racing. Always, always, always calibrate yourself in racing. You might think you're going easy. Guess what? Guess what's going to happen? You went too hard. And that's the most important thing, because everyone's concerned about, what are these short races? What if I don't have the data to like, well, boy, your data's going to be meaningless if you don't know how you felt during, right? If all you were doing was marry to a number, so many people slow down because they think they're going too fast. I'm going to use this guy as an example from this last weekend. We've been working together for, I don't know, 3.5 years, 4 years. And he's had some amazing races, been on the podium at 70.3. He's very, very fast, very accomplished athlete, would whip my ass easily. And the last, I think, 6 to 8 months been the most inconsistent he's ever been because he made a huge move, changed jobs, went through a lot of personal stuff like we all have, and went into this race, a half marathon, wasn't even sure what he was going to do, the full or the half, until a few weeks beforehand. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then goes out, no watch. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what to expect. No idea. Didn't know if he was going to do watchless or not. But ever since he ran watchless and running a couple of years ago, he's like, it's been the best thing ever. Goes out, runs watchless, PRs his half marathon, and negative splits the thing. How do you know that? Well, because you have these things called timing mats and a chip you put around your ankle. That's all we need to know. The biggest win, because I guarantee you, if he had worn his watch, he would have slowed himself down. Because what your watch does is it also goes through your mind and your self-doubt of thinking, well, but I haven't been that consistent these last few months. I haven't really gotten as much work as I had in the past. I'm a PR in the past this 3, so I'm way overrunning. So you slow yourself down. And then you don't run your fastest. So what did we learn? We've got data. We've got our watch. But we didn't learn anything. All we learned is that you're a prisoner and you take your commands from your device. That's it. That's all we learned. But instead, he didn't have any idea how fast he was running. All he knew was what he was feeling. So it ended up being a great thing. It ended up working out really, really well. I guarantee you he would have ran slower had he worn a watch. So data be damned. It doesn't mean anything in these races like that. When you do sprints and you do an Olympics, figure out what you feel. And if you feel these, is it even a correct? Am I even right? Because on race day, when you do, right, these longer races like 70.3s and fulls, where you want to, ride by watts or heart rate, or you want to run by, heart rate or watts or pace or whatever it is, you want to use that to your ability so you can execute, because the day is longer and it matters more and you want to hold yourself back. But you also need to know what it feels like, right? You want to have had those feelings where you know what feels like what, versus I got to do what my watch tells me to do, even if I know I feel too hot or I know my heart rate is too high. Like, you have to know what that feels like, because if you don't, and you don't know the signs, and you don't have the experiences to go back on, then you're going to blindly follow your device and more than likely your poor race plan. And you're going to follow it to you start walking and you bonked. And you'll blame it on a sundry of things, and you won't blame it on your inability to feel and stick to your guns. And it is something that people struggle mightily with. They want to control everything. And that leads to a lack of expression of your total fitness. So when you do these sprints and Olympics in the lead up, dust it off and don't have a plan, or have a plan to blow up. Guarantee you won't. Guarantee it. If you are a 70.3 or a full distance athlete and you go into a sprint Olympic with the goal of blowing up, I guarantee you 99 times out of 100, you won't. You won't blow up, because you've trained, your body has become so trained, right? I've used this example of myself, an experience I did like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. I was doing an Olympic. I was like, all I was doing it was my best 70.3 I ever had. So 2018. And I was in some great shape, and I was like, I'm going to burn it today. I'm going to light this bike course up. I'm going to bury myself. Bury it. Put my watch in my back pocket. I'm not going to look. I'm just going to lay it down. Get out of the swim. I think I'm in like second place on the bike. Come off like fourth overall. Have a good run. Go back in my look. Telling you, smoked it today. Went after it. Looked at my bike. 70.3 watts. It's like, no, I didn't. I did not lay it down. Period. I did exactly the number that I had trained to do, which was 220. That was my 7.3 watts, like 220, 230. That's where things fell that year. What was my Olympic? 220. I was like, you're such a long course athlete. Like, why? Learn how to bury yourself. And the reason I didn't know, because it was the first Olympic I had done in 4 years. I think since I had actually been back in Kansas City. Before that, I did the KC Triathlon here, and then a couple local races, and then that one back at Montgomery Bell State Park, I think the one that you came to. But it was like, man, I hadn't done one in forever, so I didn't know what it was like to go hard. And to go hard outside, because going hard outside feels a lot different than going hard inside. And going hard after you've gone on for a swim also feels a lot different. Everyone's super obsessed with brick running. I got to get my brick runs in, because brick running is a totally different sport. It'll make me a much more triathlon runner if I learn how to brick run. How many of you swim in the bike? Zero. No one does swimming hard and then go into bike. They want to do the brick run. I have no idea why, but they do it. Swimming hard and then biking, totally different ball game. Totally different, right? You have to be able to go through those things and experience those things. So swim hard. I did give you a little piece of advice with any athlete that asked me about pacing themselves for a sprint. And honestly, for 70.3 athletes, how I told them to race an Olympic is swim solid, bike like there is no run, and then find a way to run. That's it. That's the only way you're going to absolutely demolish yourself in a race and go top level and find your real threshold, is to pretend like there isn't something next. Because we do have that. Going back to the very, very, very beginning of this podcast, when we were off topic, we were talking about kind of our, our body and our mind always will kind of like flip that switch of, self-preservation. Slow down. Take it easy. Heart rate's too high. Just walk. Breaststroke for a little bit. Walk through transition. Take the aid station easy. You're getting too hot. You need more ice. Everything, right? All the alarm bells that go off tell you to stop, tell you to slow down, tell you to take it easy, tell you it's dangerous. All of them, right? So the more data, the more, technology you have strapped to every single piece of your body, right? Tells you, or alarms go off or beeping, and I put my heart rate on a max, and it's like, why? Go out and find out what happens. Everything will tell you to slow down. You don't need extra beeps to tell you to slow down. Your body already does that. What you need to do is figure out how to tell your body to do more, or to listen to your body and realize that it's actually telling you what it's telling you. And you're not because what most of the time happens, your body is telling you everything you need to know, but your interpretation skills are horrific. Horrific. You think it's telling you one thing, and you think your body's telling you one thing, and you're telling it the opposite, right? And it goes both directions, right? It's telling you to slow down, and you feel incredible, and you're like, is it my device is telling me to slow down, but I feel incredible. Okay, disregard, right? Or your device is telling you to push on. Your interval is supposed to be 7:50 to 8:10 today, but your body's like, this is not feel right. So who do you listen to? Listen to your body. Always. But we become so obsessed with guiding ourselves along, right? In this, like, that's why we always encourage athletes to go out and watch these ITU races, or even some of the Super League arena games, like indoor races where that's all inside. But especially the ITU races, they don't even wear watches. The best athletes in the world, right? One of them moved up and did a descent for the ocean side and beat everybody, got first. Is they won't wear a watch. So the best athletes in the world with the best coaches in the world aren't concerned about the data when they get off. They aren't. Mm-hmm. Yes, they'll have maybe a bike computer, but do you think in the middle of it they're like, I don't know, man. I could probably catch that front pack, but I need to kind of keep the watts down a little bit today. That's what no, they just fucking hammer it. They hammer it to see what the kind of surges are like, to see what their competitors are holding. On the run, no watch. On the swim, no watch. And on the bike, they just have it. They're not. You think if their coaches were that concerned with having every single bit, then they would make them wear them 24/7. It's about finding your limit, not limiting yourself. And that's what we've become obsessed with, is limiting ourselves with devices, because from numbers that we got from nowhere, right? Great ways to test things out. So you have to, again, you have to be more, I think you have to be more aggressive. Everybody. And again, you and I are speaking from experience, been there. When you're out of practice from going there, you're out of practice. So the only way to go there is to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just quickly on that, I think about this a lot, because I used to, as you know, be a huge chrono guy. I would only wear chrono, and I would just hit lap buttons and kind of go by that and not think about, because like I think about this all the time. I'm out on the trail yesterday with my Garmin, and I know these paces are off, and like, whether it's slower than you think or faster than you think, it gets in your head, right, in that moment, and it's probably wrong. So what do you do with that? I mean, I just feel like that kind of puts a hitch in your gait, if you think you're going too fast, or it makes you dig deeper if you're going too slow on that readout, and it's not always accurate. So I always used to love to hit lap at the mile markers, and I would know I was in the ballpark, and if I was feeling good, I would just let it flow and trust it. That's what would happen. And that's when I feel like I was running my best, for sure.
Keeps you in the moment.
Yeah, really does. I mean, you can't overanalyze things. You just kind of breathe and run. That's really what it boils down to.
Well, and I'll even, the run I referenced on Sunday, where I had that like excruciating, I had a momentarily femur break. That resolved itself in 3.5 minutes I was aiming for intervals at like the 722 to like 820. So I had a wide range, right? A minute. Mm-hmm. So they weren't top end. They were just like high aerobic. And obviously the first one I was like, all right, I used the guide, right? I used the range I had. I was like, but I'm feeling pretty good today. Like I'm feeling aerobically, I felt good. My legs were a little bit tired, but I was like, I felt pretty good. Aim for around 7:30, and then I found myself on the intervals, looking at my watch too much, to see if I was too fast or if I was too slow. And I was like, you know what? I said, I know what feels comfortable and steady, which is how I'm supposed to feel, right? The point of this, I know what interval, right, and what intensity is supposed to correlate to what feeling, right? It's supposed to be tempo. It's supposed to be controlled, steady, focused aerobic, right? It's not sloppy. It's not, super zone 2. It's just, if it's very focused, right? Very, very focused. And so I said, you know what? I'm not going to look anymore. I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to run solid. I'm going to make sure aerobically I feel good. And that's all I'm going to care about. And so my first interval, when I was looking at my watch too much, it was like, 7:29, 7:30. Next interval, didn't look at all. You know what it was? 7:32. Exactly. I knew the feeling, and I knew it right. I just had to trust that what I was doing was correct. And I had to just disassociate and not worry about it. Now, if I'd have been like 6:50, there wouldn't have been a problem, right? So I always think, like, with intervals like that, even on the bike, and we talk about that a lot, is adjusting how you're feeling, based on your warm up and guessing what feels like what, and seeing how close you are, do those things. I love, another great representation of how you understand your body and space with speed is to leave your house trying to do a certain amount of time and loop yourself back to it and try to get within 2 to 3 minutes. It's very hard to do if you're a person who doesn't have great feel of their body and space, and versus, and combined with speed. How far have I gone? How pace was, because if you think about all the calculations, it's actually not that easy, right? You be gone for 30 minutes, but still go 5 miles, if you're going really fast, or you could go 30 minutes and be gone for 3 miles. Very, very different, right? But it's all about the time in which you return. So that's always a good skill that I think you should all have, is like, or, if you are trying to go for, an hour and you run out for 30, you're going to pick the turnaround spot based on your speed and keeping the same speed, right? And get back and see how close you get to home. But all that comes from calibration on all different levels, from what zone 1 feels like and what zone 5 feels like. So when you implement these races, again, make them have a purpose, right? Make sure they layer in correctly with the theme of what you're trying to do with your body. Because again, we can close it out here. A lot of times what happens is you insert a race hoping it's going to be a rust buster. But a lot of times with these sprints and Olympics, or even 70.3s, it becomes a rust creator, because you're in a great zone. You've done a lot of great work, right? You want a great training stimulus, which your training will give you, but you sign up for a sprint in an Olympic, think it's going to be a great training stimulus and to dust the rust off, but you taper your whole week into a sprint, which you could do in an hour and a half on a Thursday after work. And then you do the sprint and you control yourself, right? And you don't go at intensity. And then it takes you a couple of days to recover. So you lose a week. You lose stimulus. You lose a week. Same thing for Olympics, training into 70.3s and 70.3s in the fulls. Like, what you want to get out of it isn't necessarily what you're going to get out of it. And then it gets you off routine, it gets you off structure, and you don't get anything out of it because you didn't really go after it. So have a plan, work the plan, and then figure things out, right? Did it work out well? Did it not work out well? Right? Yes, you want to figure out gearing and do I need tinted goggles or not tinted goggles? Is my aero helmet right? Does my kit feel good? All those things are fine, but you'll figure that out as you're going full speed. as you're going full speed, right? Like, you don't need to think your way through it, because it brings it back to an example from an athlete that I had doing Tech 7.3. Is they went and did like a 6-mile run the Wednesday afterwards, and I said, if you're running like this 3 days after your 7.3, then we did not go hard enough. And she said, I know, I didn't. I was so happy to get out of the water that I didn't push myself the rest of the day. All things to think about, right? Because it was just perfectly recovered. She could have gone back to her regularly scheduled programming like 24 hours later, because it wasn't, she didn't bury herself on the run, because from a mental standpoint, the day was over when she got out of the swim. All things and that plays a role with so many people, right? But, when they come out of a sprint or Olympic or a full or whatever, they're so happy to make it out of the swim that the rest of the day they're just kind of like, rolling around happy. And you got to find that switch, and then you got to know how to flip it.
I'm with you, man. It's a good thing.
It's always a good thing. So get out there, find your sprints, find your Olympics, race short and race fast, and support your local races, because a lot of them are not being supported. So get out there and do them. I guarantee you will be humbled. I 100% guarantee you will be humbled in a good way, and hopefully figure out some things about yourself in the process. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. It's also a great way to support the podcast. You can click on the online store, purchase some swag, purchase some gear. Got some great items in there. Again, that's the best way to support us. You can go over to our camps page. We have a few openings for our Wisconsin camp, maybe even a few for our Nashville camp in June. Check those out on the camp tab. If you have any questions that are specifically for Mike, he is available, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. I guess I will talk to you soon.
All right, man. See you Thursday.
Thanks. All right, bye.